What's up, everybody? Eric here from That's Wrestling. You can find the podcast over at thatswrestling.com or all on your favorite various podcast platforms. This show is currently dedicated to New Japan and AEW, and on this particular episode, we're going to be talking about the explosion of wrestling that is going to be happening coming up here in October, where the entire landscape goes crazy. So we are, 7, 8, 9 days away from AEW going live on TNT. So this is going to be the first major, I would say, competition that WWE has had since WCW went under. We're looking at 18 years ago now. Impact, they had their time, but I don't think they ever got close enough to be legit competition. But in this case, we have massive money behind a promotion in Tony Khan. And one of the things that I think is going to be an advantage for AEW is the fact that Tony Khan is a lover of wrestling, and he has been for a very long time, ever since he was a kid. So I think everybody's been making these comparisons to WCW for AEW, and I think they're off the mark, because I think in this instance, Tony Khan is a student of the game, if you will, unlike Ted Turner, who just brought the money. And I don't know if you guys have listened to Tony Khan on Steve Austin's podcast, but this guy has an amazing capacity to remember a lot of things. This guy has an almost eidetic memory, it seems, and him being able to pull out these dates of various wrestling events is very impressive. So, given how much aptitude he shows and knowledge he has of the wrestling business, I think he has a huge advantage over what WCW was and how they performed. So in this case, well, for one, it's not the TV network that really owns the promotion. It's being owned separately of a television network by Tony Khan. So in this instance, he doesn't have a massive board to really answer to, but obviously he needs to make sure that the television show makes up enough ratings that they can continue on their deal with TNT. Now, the deal for TNT has been a little bit obscured, I guess. We don't know how long the deal is. Some say it's a year. Some say it's 2 years. Some say it's 3 years. I think 2 years is kind of the most widely reported, but I don't think I've seen it confirmed anywhere that it is actually going to be 2 years. But let's say that they do have a deal for 2 years. What does that mean? And how long or what type of performance can the TV show have and TNT be okay with it? And will TNT be happy enough that instead of just covering production costs, which it seems like that is what's going to be going on here, at least in the current deal, and I think there's some revenue sharing as well, will they get a TV rights deal with TNT? Or maybe they'll grow big enough that maybe a different network might want to take them on. I guess that's really up to I guess that's really up to the future and what we see from that. But as far as who's at the helm I think we're in pretty good hands when it comes to AEW and Tony Khan. Like I said, just because he seems to be a student of the game. If you haven't, go check it out on Steve Austin's podcast when Tony Khan was on there. It was quite impressive. So now I'm not going in this completely blind, or that there could be problems and things could go bad. I guess I'm looking at this with cautious optimism. So what I've seen so far and what I've heard, I think we're in a good position, and I think AEW is in a good position to succeed, and it's really just tempering any of the potential problems that could pop up. So going into that, when it comes to who's running the promotion and who's booking the promotion, from what it sounds like, we have Cody, Young Bucks, Kenny Omega, and Tony Khan basically booking by committee. And what I've heard Cody say is that if the product requires him to take a step back from wrestling, he is willing to do that to make AEW succeed. And he doesn't want to make AEW all about himself. And now, obviously, we have some past indications from various promoters in the past. Also, Cody's dad, Dusty Rhodes, in making some poor booking decisions to further himself versus further the promotion. Also, I mean, we see it with WWE. We saw it with WCW, where the people running the show end up making the show about themselves. We obviously saw that in WCW when Eric Bischoff, who was running the show, makes the show about him. Vince Russo is writing the show, makes the show about him. And then obviously we have all the old timers who are in WCW just running roughshod over that promotion and being out for themselves. Obviously, you got to make sure that those things don't happen. Do I believe Cody when he says that he would take a step back from wrestling if it means letting AEW succeed? I believe he believes that. Will he do that is another question, and I hope he does. But right now, one thing he and Brandy need to be wary of is how they are presenting themselves on TV as their characters, as well as how they are presenting themselves as corporate representations of AEW. Right now, we do have a little bit of them seeming to be the Triple H and Stephanie of AEW, whereas their on-screen characters don't align with their off-screen characters, which can be problematic. So, they're trying to do all this charity work and whatnot and be good community leaders, but on TV, they end up trying to be heels, and there's such a huge disconnect that it's hard for the fans to figure out which way to go. Now, I think the hardcore fans kind of understand the difference between what's being shown within the presentation of, I guess you can call it the narrative of the wrestling show that is AEW versus the behind the scenes person. It is a very interesting thing when it comes to wrestling, whereas it technically is a show and all these people are technically actors portraying a character. Most of the people are not exactly like their characters, and I think that's a it's a unique situation when it comes to wrestling versus other forms of narrative media. Obviously, when you have a regular TV show, whatever it is, we don't attribute the actions of a character on a TV show to the actor playing that character. So we know that Bryan Cranston in real life is not a meth dealer and a murderer. But for some reason in wrestling, it's hard to separate the two. And just because the presentation that these people carry into real life, and it is sometimes hard to separate the two. Obviously, these days, it's a little more on the known side. Well, it's obviously known that wrestling is a work or is a scripted or it's predetermined and all that, and that it's technically not real sport. It is, a simulated sport environment, which then kind of bleeds over into real life, because in order to make this stand out or make this path a believable path, if you will, that these people kind of carry it into their real lives as well. It's just a weird situation when it comes to pro wrestling versus other narrative media, just because it's not kind of framed in such a way that we know we are watching a TV show or we are watching a theatrical performance. We know if we're watching a play on stage, we know we are watching a performance, and we know when those people come off stage, that is not who they are. So it is just a weird situation with wrestling, how it just bleeds between the two realms, and it's hard to do. I think, like I said, the hardcore fans know that it's definitely a difference and can get over that difference. But I think a lot of the more casual fans, and even some hardcore fans still, it is hard to disconnect the two. And that is something that I think they really need to work on and make sure that, especially when it comes to any of the people who are on the corporate side and they want to present a corporate image, such as Cody and Brandy doing charity work and whatnot, I think if they want to do that, they're going to have their on-screen characters be within that realm of acting or behavior, if you will, to match up with how they portray themselves when they are off screen. I think that's kind of a big problem right now when we have Triple H and Stephanie. We have the same problems. They play heels on TV, but then they try to they do all this charitable work outside, and it's a really huge disconnect. And I think it damages the credibility of the character, and it makes it harder to get into. And like I said, this is just kind of a unique situation to wrestling over that. So that is just something I want them to take into account, that they just need to align the off-screen and on-screen with each other so we don't have these disconnects and they don't turn into the Triple H and Stephanie of AEW. That's just something I really don't want to see. And I hope that going into TV, and now that we're going to have more exposure to all these people on a regular weekly basis, that is something that they can sync up and align. So there's that. As far as what they need to do for the actual shows, I think presentation is definitely something that can be tweaked a bit. I noticed during the shows that they've been doing all this summer, We got Double or Nothing, Fight for the Fallen, Fyter Fest, and All Out. The production of the actual show has been an issue for me because it's very similar to how WWE does theirs. And one thing that bothers me to no end about WWE's production is the constant changing of camera angles every 2 seconds or even less. Like, I'm sitting there and I'm trying to count to 2 before a camera change happens, and it is annoying as hell. It is something that I hate about WWE, and it looks like AEW has been using some of the same tactics, and I'd really hope that they back off of that a bit. And really, I prefer the presentation of New Japan much more over what AEW has given us so far, and especially what WWE does normally. So one thing that I like about New Japan is the wrestlers are not playing towards the hard camera. It doesn't matter where the hard camera is, because this is supposed to be a sport. So if you're trying to do everything towards the hard camera, why would you do that if this was a legitimate competition? If you're, in the UFC and you're fighting, of course, the UFC doesn't actually use a hard cam, but if they did, the fighters don't give a crap where the cameras are. It's the responsibility of the production team and the camera people to find the action. It's not the responsibility of the wrestlers to find the cameras. Also, what all these cuts do is cause problems with pacing as far as the viewer goes. So it can make the match feel faster or slower, and it should be the wrestlers that are doing the pacing and not the production. So another thing I like about New Japan is they will hang on camera angles much longer. They will sit on a hard cam shot for a good 20 seconds, which is awesome, because then you can actually get into what's going on. You can see what's going on, and your brain isn't trying to reorient itself to where everybody is in relation to now what is your eyes. So if you hang on a hard camera shot for 20 seconds, you know spatially where all the wrestlers are. So if there's a tag team going on, there's a tag match going on, you might know that 2 guys are out fighting on the side to what is currently your left, and then there are 2 guys maybe in the ring fighting. If the camera changes to a different angle, now your brain has to go, okay, the 2 guys I see on screen are in this orientation versus the orientation from the previous shot. So that means that the other 2 guys that I currently can't see off camera anymore are in X direction. And I think that's a huge problem when it comes to WWE, and what has been not as bad, but is still not good in AEW is all these constant camera cuts. You are spatially disoriented, while most people might not recognize that that's what's happening to them. There is something in film called the 180 rule, and that's when if a character is looking left in one shot and then they change a camera angle, he should still be looking left of the screen, to the left of the screen. If you cross that line and suddenly he's looking to the right, that means you are now on the opposite side of 2 people facing each other or something like that. And while a audience viewer may not know what happened, it feels wrong for some reason. And it may be subtle and it may not be something huge, but your brain does sense something is incorrect when that happens. And they just need to make sure that they don't do that on a regular basis. And unfortunately, that happens so much in WWE, especially like if somebody does like an Irish whip corner to corner, if they're looking at the hard camera and they're sending it, so they're on like the back right hand corner and they're going to do a whip to the front left hand corner in relation to the hard cam, but then they have a cameraman that's just off the apron on the left hand side. When they switch to that from the hard camera side, they're going to send the person, they're going to be moving from right to left. If they cut before they hit that corner to that cameraman that's over on the left-hand side of the ring, suddenly that person is going to be going left to right on your screen. So suddenly your spatial orientation is thrown off because a person who was moving right to left is suddenly moving left to right, and it causes problems. And I think that's something they just need to avoid as much as possible. And I know it's just one of those things. They don't think about it. They just do it. And it's just something that really bothers me, and it can be cleaner and it should be done better. They should not be cutting every 2 seconds. And I think they just need to kind of, since it's supposed to be sport feel, cut it like a sport, not cut because we need to cut. And especially don't cut on every strike. That is one of the most annoying things in the world. In WWE, they are constantly cutting. Every time somebody throws a punch, they change the camera angle. And that's usually to cover the space, or it's to cover to make sure that if the punch isn't that good, you don't see it. It's essentially covering up a possible mistake. If your wrestlers can't make a punch or a strike look good, then they probably shouldn't be wrestling for you if you have to do those camera tricks to cover up flaws constantly. It's just one of those things. You look at New Japan, a lot of times they are throwing forearms and they're hitting each other in the side of the neck. So it doesn't matter. They don't need to cut every 2 seconds because their strikes look good because they actually are making contact. Now, obviously, it's safe contact just because of how they throw them. They're not hitting each other in the head. They're kind of hitting each other in the side of the neck where it's nice and muscly. So if you can't throw a good worked punch, find something else. If it looks crappy on camera and you have to cut to cover it, you should probably stop doing it. Or sadly, you should probably not be wrestling for one of the top organizations. That's just my opinion on that. As far as how they do how they present some of the product, how they do promos, how they do vignettes, I've talked in probably during the All Out review, is those Road to videos have been awesome. If they continue to use that type of format within their TV show for their vignettes and whatnot, I think they're going to be golden. One of the things I hate about WWE is that all of their out-of-ring stuff is just filmed backstage at the arena. We rarely ever see any videos of the wrestlers outside of an arena when they're supposed to be there, which makes no sense because it's not like story only happens when they show up for work. Where we had the Road to videos with Cody and Shawn Spears. Those were great. You had videos of Cody running in his neighborhood with narration over it, why this match is important to him. Same with Shawn Spears. You had the contract signing in an actual office, not some dressed up room at the arena. And some of it was shot multicam with more than one camera, which is fine because you're not going to have just one cameraman kind of following these people around. We are used to this type of format, especially when it comes to quote unquote reality TV shows. That kind of format would work just fine for vignettes and promos and whatnot. So what I think they should be doing is, one, when it comes to booking and putting together a show, one thing that obviously happens over on WWE's side is that Vince McMahon tears up the script for the show the day the show happens, and they have to redo the whole thing, which is why they can't do any planning and they can't do any off or out of ring work to put together vignettes and whatnot, because they might put in all that work, and by the time Tuesday rolls around or Friday rolls around or whatever it's going to be in the future, though that work could have go completely down the drain because he doesn't want to go that way anymore. AEW, I think, is going to be planning their shows out ahead of time, and they are going to take, all week to put together the show that's going to come up next. Since they're only going to be currently only doing the Wednesday show, that means they have 6 days that they can send production crews out to go film whatever they need with any of the wrestlers at various locations, and they don't have to do it just at the location where the event takes place. Another thing they can do to just kind of help that out so they don't have to send crews everywhere is have people come in a day earlier. They can film stuff around the city that they're going to. There are spaces that they can use for studio spaces all over the country. So they could just have their guys fly in the day before, and they can get some studio space somewhere. They can film outside. There's all types of places that they can produce videos at, and it doesn't have to look like the back of an arena in some made-up room that is supposed to be something else, but it's obviously, just in the back of the arena. It looks fake. They need to take the time to make that look nice and clean. And it's really not that hard if you are putting together the shows ahead of time and you know what's going to happen on the show, more than 2 minutes before you go to air. So I think that's just something that they know that they can do. And so far with these Road to videos have been excellent. And I think they need to stay with that. I mean, look at how the UFC does their hype videos, I guess you could call them. How they have the fighters sit down, talk to the camera, tell them why this is important, give some backstory on the person. They have, clips of them working out and training. All this stuff is super simple, super cheap to do, and it greatly enhances the connection between the talent and the audience. When the characters we see on screen, we have some sort of vested interest in the person or the character that is being presented. And this is just basic stuff that there's really no excuse for any organization not to do. So from there, a few other things I want to touch on is where they're going to be doing their shows from. So right now, they have been going to pretty big locations. DC, obviously, they have a huge venue. And then Boston is actually a much smaller venue. It's only about I think not for wrestling is only like 6,500. I think set up for wrestling is going to be about 5,500. So they're going to, they're not going to NBA size places, but they're going to relatively large venues. It's not going to be, these tiny little arenas or these tiny little venues. But something I have noticed that, which hopefully it changes once TV starts, is that the excitement seems to be dying down a bit. When you look on, especially the secondary market when it comes to tickets, right now, there are tickets for DC going for like $6, and there are still like 3,500 secondary market tickets for that show. So the excitement is obviously dying down a bit, but hopefully that doesn't continue. But it is something to be aware of, that these shows aren't selling out first day anymore. So DC might have sold out quickly, but I think the scalpers have really overbought a lot of these shows. So it is going to be a problem in the future when the scalpers realize they can't make money off these shows anymore. So right now, I'm looking at StubHub as I'm reading this. So right now for DC, there are 3,500 tickets left on the secondary market. For Boston, there are 1,166 tickets left, which that's like 20% of the available seating for the show. So, I mean, that is not looking good. For Philadelphia, there are 2,500 tickets still out there. For Pittsburgh, there's 1,000 tickets on the secondary market. So, this is not looking that great. And hopefully, when TV starts, it will kind of reinvigorate people. I think maybe people want to see what's going to happen now. But like I said, I mean, right now, there are tickets for both DC and Philadelphia for $6. Right now, the cheapest in Boston is $40, but I'm guessing that is going to continue to go down. It has gone down quite a lot. I'm in the Boston market, and when I first started looking at tickets, the cheapest was almost $100, and now they are down in the $40 range. And some of these are pretty decent tickets. Let me just look here for kind of a nice ticket. So, I mean, you can get middle of the ring, facing the ring for $75, and row O, row G for that middle of the ring facing the hard camera is $105. So these have come down quite a lot. I mean, these were up in the $200 range. I was looking, you could actually get ringside row B for like, wow. Right now, you can get ringside in the second row in Boston for $164. So, I mean, that is something that it definitely seems to be cooling off a bit. And that could be a concern going into the future. Yeah. So just something to be aware of. Hopefully they're not overestimating the demand and are going to start reserving themselves into a corner with some of these big venues. Obviously, right now, they're going based off of their streaming numbers, the markets that the views for streaming and pay-per-view have come from. But it is quieting down a bit versus the All Out show and the Double or Nothing and all that. I mean, just look at the Fyter Fest show. I believe it is Fyter Fest. That there is a good hunk of empty space. But I don't know how that event was put together. I'm not sure if because it was part of like a video game conference. So I don't know if you had to have a ticket to the video game conference to go see the wrestling as well. I'm not sure, but there's definitely open space in that venue for that show. So hopefully this does not become a pattern, and hopefully TV can kind of reconcile that. And one other thing, when it comes to one thing that is worrying me about AEW is going to be, how are they going to do what has classically been the pay-per-view model that has been completely turned upside down by both New Japan and WWE, where you pay a monthly subscription to their network and you get all of their content. So both of those services, New Japan is 999 yen, which is about $9.79 right now, $9.79. So it's basically $10. WE Network is the same, $10. And you get all their big shows and all their pay-per-views for free, essentially, other than the $10 a month that you pay. What is AEW going to do when it comes to their big shows? Are they going to continue with the pay-per-view model and expect people to pay $50 per show 4 times a year when we have been conditioned by 2 of the major players, and also you have Honor Club and Impact has, I don't know what their streaming service is called, but all of them are now, you have these streaming services that are much cheaper than paying $50 for 4 pay-per-views a year. So, I mean, right there, that's $200 that you'd be paying for 4 shows from AEW versus $120 a year for New Japan, all of their shows, or WWE for all of their shows. So they're going to have to seriously consider what people are going to be willing to pay on a regular basis for quote unquote big shows. And I don't think fans are going to be as willing as they think they are to pay the big bucks when all the other promotions have much cheaper available options to them to pay for the network and plus have all their catalog. So I think that's going to be an issue when it comes to AEW because they don't have a back catalog and they don't have a streaming service specifically for them that you just pay a monthly fee and you get their big shows. And if they're only going to do 4 big shows a year, like they're saying they're probably only going to do quarterly pay-per-views, I don't know how that's going to work out. Another thing is, what is their TV going to be like in Canada? I don't think they have announced a Canadian partner. So are they going to put it over on the Fight app? Are they going to put it on BR Live? That's still something that is still up in the air. And for people like me who have cut the cord, I'm going to have to get like Sling TV or something just to get AEW. So it's a little bit of a bummer because currently I don't have TNT for streaming. So I'm going to have to do something. And what are all the other people going to do that? I don't think they're going to cater to that because there's still mass amount of people that are on cable or satellite and get TNT, but it's just something to be aware of, especially in this new era where people are cutting the cord. So I might have to go with Sling TV. I think that's the cheapest option for me to get TNT, but it is what it is, I guess. So just something is. So that's what I think as far as it goes with AEW, things that they just need to be aware of, things that they need to do, or potential problems that might pop up. But like I said, I'm going in with cautious optimism for AEW to succeed. So, one more piece of AEW news. We had Kenny Omega recently making a video on, I believe it was on his Twitter, talking about NXT and them, if they were on a show with him, they would be in the dark match for what he would be doing the main event. And this has really caused some up in arms comments from a lot of people. And I think there's been a lot of overreaction to this. And I'm not sure why, because I saw this as a work, and I think other people are not seeing it as a work, and they have gotten worked. So you got to remember, this is wrestling, and you never know when people are speaking truthfully or they're speaking in character. I think this is completely a character-driven thing, and I think that based off of how Kenny Omega has done in the recent events from AEW, he's lost to Jericho, he has lost to Pac, and he has an upcoming match with Moxley. We don't know how it's going to go, but I think he's probably going to lose to Moxley as well. And I think Kenny Omega is turning heel for a while. And then I think what they're going to go for is kind of like the redemption story of Kenny Omega. And I think they're going to make Kenny Omega an even bigger star. And he is going to be huge when he kind of has that redemption story and comes back and becomes a face. How long that's going to take, I don't know. So with that, a lot of people were speculating that they thought that it was going to be Omega taking the title off of Jericho. I'm not sure that that's going to be the way to go now. I'm not sure. Most likely it's going to be a babyface taking it off of him. But right now, I don't see a clear person to take it off of him. And, well, I guess it could be a heel. You never know. So I think the biggest likely people to take the title off of Jericho, I think Pentagon is going to be at the top of that list. I'm not sure what side of the face-heel line he lands up on. I think he lands as a heel to some and a face to others. So they're going to have to clarify that once they go on TV. But I think Pentagon is a decent bet. Kenny Omega could still be in the running. We'll see how it goes, but I think he's going to be turning heel, and I think that's kind of the direction he's going. He's kind of having this breakdown. I think he's going to end up being a heel for a while, and maybe he'll turn face in a year or so. So I don't see him being the person to take it off of Chris Jericho, because we're going to go on a journey with Kenny Omega. I think that is what is going to be in line. I don't think they're going to push him right to the top. I think we're going to have a long journey with Kenny Omega. So those of us who know Kenny Omega and have been watching him for years, we have to remember that they're going on national TV in the United States where people haven't seen Kenny Omega. So I think by going on this journey and letting people in the US go on the journey with him, he is going to be even bigger when he turns to the face side. So Pentagon Jr., Omega, depending on how they play it. And then I think it's not a good choice. Not a good choice, but Moxley might be in the running for that. But I am not sure. I think we're going to be going on a bit of a journey with Hangman Page, so I don't think he's going to be taking off of Jericho, though I'm sure Hangman Page is probably going to be a big player in a couple of years. It's just one of those things that I think they tried to push him a little earlier than he was particularly ready for. I mean, the guy's only like 27 or something, so he's got plenty of time. Not too worried about that. So I think Pentagon and Moxley are probably at the top of my list currently, but we'll see how it goes. All right, so moving on to other news outside of the AEW space, but has a little bit of an impact on kind of like the rest of the large indies, so New Japan, Impact, and ROH. So Anthem, the owner of Impact, has purchased AXS Television. New Japan has kind of like their clip show on AXS Television. So what does that mean for New Japan's TV presence within the United States? Is that going to be a problem? Last I heard, their contract runs until early 2021. So unless there's some weird buyout clause or anything, which I doubt there is, New Japan's still going to be on AXS for at least the next year and a half or so. As far as Impact goes, they're going to be moving to AXS off of some no-name channel that they're on now. I think it's called Pursuit or something like that. So they're going to be moving to AXS, which is good for them because AXS is in roughly like 55 million homes, something around there, 50 million, 55 million, something like that. So they're going to get a much bigger increase. Obviously, they're going to have to figure out what to do with their time because right now they're on Friday nights and SmackDown will be airing on Friday nights starting in October. So is Impact going to move their time maybe? They might do Friday nights at, say, 10 o'clock to midnight, though that's a lot of wrestling, and I don't know how good using SmackDown as a lead-in to Impact would be. What I think they should do is they put New Japan on, say, like 8 o'clock to, I think it's only a 1 hour show. I could be wrong. If it's a 1 hour show or a 2 hour show, it doesn't matter. Put New Japan on, say, once SmackDown leaves Tuesday. They put New Japan on Tuesday night at 8 o'clock until whenever it ends, 9 or 10, whatever. And then immediately put Impact on after that. So they kind of have like a wrestling block. And I think that's probably the best way to go. Also, I think New Japan and Impact are going to need to get over their past differences. And I think they need to, start working together, especially because now Impact owns the channel that New Japan is on. If New Japan has any hope of staying on US television, they're either going to have to work very hard to find a comparable station that has at least 50 million to be in at least 50 million homes, which I'm not sure what type of channels that would open them up to even get on. That would make sense for them to be on. It's not like they're going to go on the Discover channel or something, or Discovery channel. So I think their best bet is going to be to work with Impact. Obviously, there was the Okada drama in the past, but basically everybody who was running the show over there is gone from the time that Okada had come over and they completely, made a fool of him or whatever. And one thing that they could do, if they're going to work together, then they have to run storylines and whatnot by New Japan before they do it with their talent. I think it just makes sense. They just need to have a better working relationship and work together. And I think ROH is going to have to be left out in the cold. And by the end of this, within the next 2 years, I think one of these companies are going to be gone. Either Impact's going to be gone, ROH is going to be gone, or AEW is going to fail. So one of those three, I think one of them is not going to survive, given how everything is going right now, when we are going to get overloaded with wrestling on very large national stations come October. I just don't see the excitement around or even the stomach to be able to sustain all these promotions at that level. So I think ROH is either going to be relegated to a small indie promotion or they're just going to fold. What I think would probably be best well, what I would want to happen is that Impact buys Ring of Honor and they actually shutter Impact. And they keep the Ring of Honor name, and then they go forward under the Ring of Honor name, because I don't think the Ring of Honor name has the baggage that Impact had when they were called TNA, and all the other baggage that comes along with that lineage of company. I think ROH would be much better as a name, or Impact buys ROH and they just completely revamp the whole thing with no reference to either old promotion. I think that'd be the best way to go, but I don't see that happening. But like I said, I'd like Impact to buy ROH, and then they shutter the Impact name and they switch everything to Ring of Honor, because Ring of Honor is still a good name. I think it still has value. I just think, given the financial situation of both those companies, Impact seems to be able to get money out of Anthem. ROH does not seem to be able to get enough money out of Sinclair to be competitive, especially in this market when you have two big players right now and a third with a decent pocketbook. So, I mean, you have AEW that's been throwing around big money. You have WWE that has been throwing around huge money just to keep people away from AEW. If you're ROH, you need the money to get some of the bigger talent. And I don't know how long people are going to stay in ROH when they have very, very green grass on the other side. When you're looking at payouts from AEW and WWE and even Impact, though Impact really needs to get their contract situation under control, and that's just a completely different topic. But I think it can be fixed. I think ROH could be rehabbed. I'm not sure how much Impact can be rehabbed. And then if that was to happen, that'd at least save New Japan from having to shutter one of these companies out in the cold, because right now Ring of Honor is not providing much to New Japan. It just isn't. New Japan does not need Ring of Honor as much as Ring of Honor needs New Japan. And I think that relationship is going to have to come to an end soon, because it is just not beneficial enough to New Japan to keep it going. New Japan should, like I said, probably work with Impact, because now they're the TV station is owned by them. It's one thing. They're just gonna have to swallow their pride on that one and probably start doing with that. But Impact needs to get their act together when it comes to contract situations and pay, to figure out to get that worked up. But now they're going to be over on AXS, so hopefully that means they're going to have a bigger audience and they might have a bigger pocketbook to deal with. But we'll see. So that is all I have for today. Hopefully in a week and a half, we will see a good show out of AEW. Unfortunately, I am going to be traveling for business. I was hoping to do live post shows right after AEW's Wednesday night shows, which is actually called Dynamite. I forgot to mention that. So I'm hoping to do live, but unfortunately on this first show, on the 2nd, I am traveling for work. And then on the 9th, I plan to be at the show. So unfortunately, the first 2 weekends, I can't do that because it just didn't work out that way. But starting the week after that, I believe the 16th, I plan to go live on YouTube right after the show goes off the air, and I will be able to take phone calls. I'll be able to take Discord. I'll be able to take Skype. So if you want to join the conversation, you can. And I will post all that when we get a little closer. There is a YouTube channel. You can check it out. If you just search That's Wrestling on YouTube, you will find it. I hope to make a few shorter links and whatnot so we can get all that stuff together. But you can also check out in the show notes as well. I'll start putting that in the show notes so you guys can subscribe over there if you'd like to participate in any of the live shows and whatnot. Anyways, my name is Eric. You can send in questions, comments, feedback, discussion topics, whatever you want, to me at eric@thatswrestling.com. Like I said, you can find this as a podcast. If you're watching this over on YouTube, you can find this as a podcast on all your favorite directories, or you can go to thatswrestling.com and get that directly from there. So thanks for listening, everybody, and I will talk to you again soon on That's Wrestling.